Entering the atmosphere in T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Omega Metroid podcast from OmegaMetroid.com. My name is Andy Spiteri, joined by Dakota Lasky. What's going on, man?
Not too much, man. Been pretty busy with work. I just picked up the new Call of Duty, though. I have been playing Black Ops 6,
Okay.
so that's been fun. Yeah, you know, it's a hectic month, but yeah, all things are going pretty well. For whatever reason, it is still like 70-something degrees in November. I don't know about where you are, but it should not be 70-something degrees in November where I am here in New Jersey. So that's been something. I might be wearing a sweatshirt right now, but I could have walked out in a t-shirt and jeans earlier today. So that's been on my mind a little bit, but otherwise doing decently well. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. I was going to say, you might have to do some real-time conversion for me again, because 77 is
Okay.
warm, right?
Uh,
Where's the old
it's
Celsius to Fahrenheit here?
it's 25 degrees Celsius.
Oh my god. Okay, yeah, it is definitely not.
Well,
Actually,
that's
it started
77
snowing here.
degrees.
But
Did it really?
It did, but it's that type of snow that that just like goes away, after a couple hours. But it's a sign of things
It's like
to
snow
come.
flurries. Yeah,
Which
it's currently 66 degrees Fahrenheit right now, so it's 18.8 degrees Celsius.
that's nice. That's a nice temperature.
It shouldn't be nice. It's November. It should be cold. It should be crispy. It should be a brisky and whatnot. It should not be nice
Yeah, but
and warm. That's for summertime. It's springtime.
I feel like I'll take it. Because when it's not, at least here, that means that like minus 40 isn't far away. I don't know what that is in your temp, but it's freezing. So we'll see. I am happy that we made it through Halloween at least without any snow. So we have kind of a weird episode here today, actually. So there's been some news lately in the last week or so in the world of not Metroid necessarily, but definitely Nintendo. And probably what we should start off with is like the absolute most breaking news that literally happened 5 minutes ago, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's now like 10, 15 minutes ago. So
Yeah.
literally as we were chatting here before we were about to hit record, this news dropped.
I have to say, I absolutely love the way that Nintendo tweets. It's just like, this is Miyamoto, this is Furukawa. I love it. I don't know what it is. It's just so blunt and like weird and charming. But I'm gonna read everybody verbatim. And this is from Nintendo Co. Limited, verified over on Twitter. This is Furukawa. At today's corporate management policy briefing, we announced that the Nintendo Switch software will also be playable on the successor to the Nintendo Switch. Switch Online will be available on the successor to Nintendo Switch as well. Further information about that's where the tweet cuts off. I don't know if there's there we go. Further information about the successor to Nintendo Switch, including its compatibility with Nintendo Switch, will be announced at a later date. So
Yeah.
I think we all suspected this, but it's nice to have a little bit of confirmation that indeed the Switch 2 is going to be able to play Switch 1 games, and indeed NSO is going to transfer over. I don't know about you, Dak, but this to me is like very like kind of confirmation that the Switch 2 is going to be like the 3DS if the Switch was like the DS,
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody kind of knew that like the Switch literally has so many games sold on it, right? That for Nintendo to leave all those people's libraries behind, I don't think was ever really going to happen. But I mean, it's good confirmation because it was kind of up in the air it was up in the air until they decided they're just going to tweet this news out 15 minutes ago, which is great. No, I mean it's definitely good because it definitely tells us a lot more about like what the Switch 2 is, which really does seem to be like a Switch 2 and not like, a Wii from the GameCube kind of situation. Like it's going to be in like 100% in the family of Switch, the Switch family. Obviously, the Nintendo. I mean, they're still calling it Nintendo Switch Online, so it might still even be called the Switch 2 in the end of the day. Which obviously for Metroid fans means that if you're playing Dread, if you're playing Metroid Prime Remastered, or you're playing any of the other titles that are on NSO for Metroid, you're going to be able to carry that over into Switch 2, which is obviously super exciting for us.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I could still see it being called like, I think it's going to be called Nintendo Switch something. Like I think
The
Switch
Super
is.
Switch, man.
We were talking about that in Discord earlier, and in my initial thought was like that's ridiculous, but I don't hate it as long as they market it properly, you know. And that's really the thing is like the Wii U actually could have been fine. It just wasn't marketed properly, and I think that they've certainly learned from that blunder. I would hope so, anyways. So you know what, I'd actually be open to the Super Switch. There's worse names it could be.
I think the it's twofold. Number one, yeah, like how they presented it. If everyone remembers, like when the Wii U was first revealed, which I want to say was what was that E3 2011,
2011, yeah.
right? Yeah. When and I remember I was at that E3. I wasn't at the conference, but I was watching it from the hotel room. And I remember that conference. I don't even think they showed the console itself.
They
They
didn't.
only showed the gamepad. So it made it look like it was literally an accessory for the Wii. And then secondly, when you think of the name Wii U, like what is U adding to the name? It doesn't mean anything. Whereas like Super Switch, it's gonna be a better Switch. The Switch Pro, like it's gonna be a better Switch. So like in the name makes a lot more sense. I mean, the Super Nintendo is certainly a fine, name back in the
Yeah.
day, right? Like that was fine. I thought 3DS was good, and I was always waiting for them to put out a mobile version of the DS, like a phone kind, called the 3GS. But
Oh.
but maybe I was too ahead of my time.
Do you remember? Hold on a second. Do you remember the? Oh god, the Nokia N Gauge.
Yeah, of course I do.
What
Yeah.
a system that was. I remember I had a Laura Croft game on it that was actually supposed to be kind of good, the best game that it was. But they were really quite ahead of their time.
Yeah, they were 100% ahead of their time. I think for the Switch here, they'll probably. I mean, they might even call it the Switch 2, to be straight up, and just like make it like why not? They've had the PlayStation 2, Xbox
Mm.
has done similar things. They can call it the Switch 360 or something, the Switch 1000. I don't know. But I think this backwards compatibility, number one, certainly gives us like an idea of what the Switch 2 I think is going to be more so, right? It's
Yeah.
going to be similar to the Switch, which is kind of good news because the Switch is great. It might just be a more powerful Switch. And then, of course, being able to carry over your whole library, absolutely huge. And now the Switch 2 is only going to be more of a stronger library because it's to bring all of what the Switch had over initially. And that really kind of makes me think like, okay, like what's like the real big hook for the
Mm.
Switch 2? Because backwards compatibility, it's a hook, but it's something that they like tweeted out, It's something that's almost like a given for them. So I'm wondering like, okay, backwards compatibility is not like it's going to be a selling point, but it's not like the hook, like the real reason you're getting it, because obviously that's not going to be a reason for you to just buy a new console if it's going to play the games on the console you already have.
Yeah.
So that kind of gets my mind going a little bit. I think the biggest thing is having the Nintendo Switch Online carryover, because Nintendo is notorious for having like their online and digital marketplaces not carry over. Like Virtual Console is a huge example of that. So
Mm.
to know that like your everything you've subscribed to and all the games you've bought are going to carry, from the past 8 years are going to carry over, I think is maybe even more important than like the physical backwards compatibility, because that digital library can expand so many more generations and you can dive into. Now it's good to know that all that stuff's staying together. Like for people who might be buying digital games on their Switch this holiday season, now they might feel a little bit more enthused to buy more of those kinds of games, knowing that they don't have to worry about losing access to that stuff when they carry over to the Switch 2, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't know if I'd say NSO carrying over is. I think probably if I had to pick one, it would have been backwards compatible, but I'd say this one isn't too far behind it. Like I think it's really important as well. I
Yeah,
mean,
you're
first
probably
of
right.
all, it just kind of shows that like Nintendo, like it seems like the obvious move, and there's been so many times being a Nintendo fan over the years where they don't do the obvious move, right? Like they go
Yeah.
the other way. So that's good to see. The other thing actually that I think which is kind of exciting about the NSO carrying over is like I feel like there's got to be something like an addition coming to it, and I don't know what that is. I think a lot of people out there are probably saying, GameCube games, put them on NSO, and that could be the case. But I don't know if that. I think it's probably just as likely to have like DS games, or I don't know, something. But it feels like there's got to be something that's going to be on the NSO in order to bring it forward. Maybe it's Dreamcast games, maybe it's Sega Saturn games. Like that's pretty exciting, like thinking about that, especially if you're of my generation and you didn't really play a lot of Sega games growing up, because you were a Nintendo guy. So I think that's pretty cool to think about. And but I think that something is going to be there as kind of like a selling point when the Switch 2 launches, or I don't know, maybe when they get the infrastructure ready to incentivize you to like get your NSO over. I think they probably could just bring it over and that'd be fine. But I think they'd want to have something there to really incentivize people to get it. And maybe that's not even games. Maybe it's something else, kind of, which we'll touch on in a little bit, but like the music app. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, just to me, it feels more classic Nintendo. Like when I was growing up, like especially in the 2000s, like I had a DS, which was backwards compatible with the GBA. I had, a GBA, which was backwards compatible with the Game Boy Color. You had the Wii, which was backwards compatible with the GameCube, to the point it had literal GameCube controller ports on the console. Like, so growing up, at least for me, like that was the norm, I think. And then I think in the past decade, coming from the Wii to the Wii U to the Switch, and obviously with the 3DS and the DS, like there's been less of that. There's been less of that kind of like honoring your previous purchases from Nintendo's end. And now we're getting more of that. And I don't think this was really coming as a shock to anybody. Like the Switch is literally like so huge, to ignore the backwards compatibility for that would just be such a blunder for them. I honestly feel like if they didn't have backwards compatibility, it would almost kill the console, like out of the gate.
That would have been tough. Like
I think it would. I think it would have.
People were furious when the Super Nintendo wasn't backwards compatible, and now kind of looking back, it's like I get it. I agree.
You're right,
I just like that. That would have been so unfathomable not to do that it almost made me worry that they were in fact going to do that. But so I'm glad that we have like official confirmation that you can play Metroid Dread, you can play Metroid Prime Remastered, whatever else have you, on the Switch 2 whenever that's coming out. They did confirm that the announcement still is coming out before the fiscal year of 2025, if I'm not mistaken. So
by March.
By March, yeah.
By March. So I'm probably February. But I mean, it could be like a March reveal and then like a summer or holiday.
Yeah,
right? Like
this is my fantasy booking. I think that they have a big reveal, like with games, so like the console and games in January, and maybe that bad boy's out by June. It'd be tight, but I think you could do it.
Yeah, I mean, when did the original Switch come out? Wasn't that pretty much what happened with it? It was almost the same thing.
Yeah, the console was revealed in October. January, we had the games presentation with that Zelda Breath of the Wild trailer, and then March 3rd was the day. That was the
so it was pretty much 6 months, you know? So if they announce it in March, it could be out by the end of the summer. I would have to imagine if it gets announced by then, it's going to be out before the holiday season.
Mm-hmm.
On that note, that also means that Metroid Prime 4 gonna be playable on Switch 2, so you don't gotta worry about that. Will it be looking better or enhanced? I don't think so.
See. Yeah, we'll see.
I don't think so. I don't think it will be.
I think it's gonna be the best looking game on Switch for sure. But
yes,
the best looking game on Switch, I don't know. Well, I guess we'll see what Metroid Prime 5 looks like if they make one. But I still personally would have kept it for the Switch 2, but that's neither here nor there. Speaking of NSO, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this music app that came out, seemingly out of nowhere, actually. And this is not what was rumored to be that secret NSO playtest thing that everybody was signed up for. I've heard some rumors about what it is.
I completely forgot about that. It was some like weird, like social, almost MMO-y type game. Like
you know what it seemed like?
I saw a little bit of it.
Utopia, almost.
Yeah, it had a vibe of that.
Yeah. So it's not related to that, but Nintendo does what they're gonna do, and they had a brand new app that came out and has all of not all, it has a lot of Nintendo music on it. So now there is finally an official way to listen to Nintendo music, albeit with a bunch of caveats that are attached to this. The first and foremost is that you do indeed have to be a member of NSO in order to get this app. Not I don't know, not ideal, but I guess at the same time I'm like, well, for me that uses Spotify, it's unusable to me without premium, so like I pay for that. I already pay for NSO anyways, so like that's not a big deal to me, but I can see people taking umbrage with that, and I think that's fair. And I guess the other thing, well, there's a couple things actually. One of the other problems with this app is that right now it has no credits listed at all for composers, none, which is pretty lame. But I think like some people, such as yourself, are just kind of taking umbrage with the fact that basically it's done like this at all. In an ideal scenario, I think Nintendo obviously releases their music on Spotify or has their own official YouTube channel for YouTube, whatever, right? Their own dedicated app for it is a very Nintendo kind of move. It's very weird. It's very not against the current, let's just say. I kind of feel like for this being what it is, and it is what it is, I think it's probably the best version that we could have got. Because the app itself is pretty cool. It's a lot like Spotify. I don't necessarily disagree with your criticisms, and I'll turn the floor over to you in just a second here, but I think, again, like, for what it is, it's pretty cool.
I mean, I had a whole discussion about this on Discord, and honestly, I can't go as hard as I did there because it's almost ironic because my whole thing was that like Nintendo gets applauded for like the bare minimum, and I just spent the last 15 minutes applauding them for doing backwards compatibility, which is what they should be doing in bare minimum. But so a little hypocritical on my end, but yeah, I mean, just Nintendo is always so behind the times in many ways. Like, I should be able to just go onto Spotify or go onto YouTube or go onto Apple Music or whatever and find the whole soundtrack the day the game drops and play it all the way through like I can for many other games. And from a consumer's perspective, I already have a Spotify subscription, right? I can get YouTube for free or whatever. I get Spotify for free if I wanted to, right? And I can access that stuff. From Nintendo's point of view, obviously they're trying to add value to NSO, and I believe like there's maybe some features on the app that are like you can like loop like track seamlessly or something like that you might not be able to do on some apps. Okay, fine. Like I'm not gonna rip into the app as much as maybe I did previously, but it just feels like it's again one of those like silly things where I think the biggest thing is the drip feeding of the music. Like I think I would have less of a problem with the app if they released the app and it had everything on there or 90% or 80, you know, like the fact that it came out with like 1% of Nintendo's official soundtracks, like, and then is drip feeding like one every couple days, and I see people like, oh, there's a new OST on there. I'm like, come on, like there should all be on there, man. And it's I sometimes I just wish that people held Nintendo to a higher standard. But like, what are you gonna do? Like, Nintendo's gonna Nintendo. They're gonna do what they're gonna do. 90% of people are gonna be like, "This is great," or they don't care because they're casual gamers, and that's fine. Like, there's no problem with that. It just kind of came across as funny to me because it's like a music app for like it feels so 10 years ago, and also just like I would at least be okay with it if it had everything on there. Like, I think for Metroid, it has. I want to say Metroid Prime Remastered and the original NES Metroid, and that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
It doesn't even have Super Metroid on there. It doesn't even like come on, like that's crazy to me. Like I think for Mario, it has Super Mario Brothers and Odyssey. Like I could be wrong.
It doesn't have like a ton. You're right, and it doesn't. Like I do kind of like the app itself. I think is good, and I get like I guess on one hand, like I get like not launching with everything because that's a lot of music to put on, but I guess like on the other hand too, like if you were going to launch this app, maybe you should have waited till the infrastructure was there, or like the everything was ready in order to do it. So like I can, I mean, I can understand again the criticisms, and I actually don't even necessarily disagree with them. In an ideal world, like this would just be on Spotify. I mean, let's just call it what it is, or YouTube, or whatever have you.
Or both.
Or both.
Like have
yeah.
the app and then still let me access it elsewhere, because like then that way like more people could listen to it if they wanted to. Like it's the same thing with like with Smash Ultimate. It had that like music app player thing.
Yeah.
Like that's cool, but it's like the most clunky way to access this music that should be so easily and readily accessible to everybody. And should have been for a while.
It is strange because I mean, like I know Spotify doesn't pay a lot to their artists, and I'm sure the same is applicable of YouTube. I would say, and
Nintendo strapped for cash.
Well, and that's kind of it,
Classically.
like I get it. Like you want to be able to have this app and control it, and Nintendo typically has always been about control. I just
Yeah.
like there is kind of a point where it's like, okay, how do we balance what's best for the consumer versus what's best for the company? And like I think if it were me, I'd probably just, even if it doesn't make a lot of money, put it out there. And because I think that there's like an element of like free marketing that comes with it too. Because like Spotify Wrapped, it's like, okay, well, great. I'll listen to a lot of Nintendo music this year. I'm going to share it on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. So like if it were me, but I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. I didn't disagree with you. And some people are excited about it, which is awesome. And I think that that's great, actually. Because like I said, the app itself is pretty cool. But it's just a very Nintendo way to do it.
I wish people wanted more for themselves and weren't just happy with the bare minimum. You know what? That's totally fine if you are. That's cool. And maybe when we were talking to Discord, some people were like, I don't see this as the bare minimum. Like, this is great. I'm like, you know what? That's totally fine. I think just like comparing it to other companies, and not to say that, Nintendo should be copying Microsoft or Sony or whatever, but there are some things that are standard practice in the industry for a reason. And one of those things is certainly accessibility. I mean, Nintendo has a problem with accessibility to their games in general, right? Which certainly should be improved. So yeah, just something that, I mean, I think it's again something that'll likely be improved over time, and once it's in a better state, I'm sure when Switch 2 drops, by then it'll have all the music people really want to listen to, and it'll be great or something like that. It was just kind of funny to see that. I'm like, oh, all right, cool music app with a couple soundtracks on it, and I gotta go on my. I mean, at least it's not. I will say, at least it's not only on the Switch. I can get it on your phone.
And
I will say that.
And it does play music too. I was fully prepared, like on regular YouTube, when you're on your phone and you just go to your home screen, the video will stop.
Oh
I was
my God.
fully
Okay.
prepared for that to happen with this app, and it doesn't do that. So
Okay. All right. Maybe it's not so bad. Maybe it's not so bad. Unless you had anything more to talk about the app, I wanted to actually bring this back to Metroid.
I'm ready to talk about Metroid 2 actually, but you go ahead because I want to talk about some sales.
Well, I want to talk about this. So yes, we can go into that. So people like literally a lot of this sales stuff has come out today, and obviously the backwards compatibility news just dropped like a half hour ago, and there's still more stuff getting posted right now. And I'm looking at an image that was just posted in our Discord, in our general social actually. So if you want to pull that up on yourself, Andy, they're talking about like Nintendo Switch software will be playable obviously on the successor. They're looking at future outlook of like Nintendo accounts and like expanding the Nintendo IP. And there's one section from this part of the report that talks about many series titles are showing growth on Nintendo Switch. And one of the franchises shown on this, alongside Pikmin, Kirby, and Xenoblade Chronicles, is Metroid. So they have, look at that, Metroid being, and it's also the Metroid Dread text, by the way. It's not the Metroid Prime. Not that they would, I guess, put that, but it's a chart that compares the total sales volume for series titles on the Wii U and 3DS versus the series titles on Nintendo Switch for each of the IPs I just mentioned. They say many series titles such as Pikmin, Kirby, Metroid, and Xenoblade Chronicles have seen dramatic sales growth on Nintendo Switch. And for Metroid, not that Metroid really had a crazy, showing on the Wii U and 3DS generation, but going from 0.98 million units sold to 4.99, almost 5 million units sold on the Switch.
Hmm.
Almost, 5 times higher sales. That's not bad. I think that's number one, obviously great to see as a Metroid fan, but also great to see that Nintendo is citing that in their
Yes.
official reports and are pointing to look at the growth that this series, as well as others, is having on the Switch. I mean, I think that bodes well, number one, for the series, but also Nintendo's outlook for the series, that they can use it as an example that they're maybe not proud is the right word, but like maybe it is. Like they're like, look at this. Like this is good results we're seeing, not just from Kirby, not just from Pikmin, not just from Xenoblade, but from Metroid as well, which historically has not been a series that they've pointed to in terms of sales performance, and for good reason.
Hmm.
So, I mean, that's certainly something to look at, because I would have to imagine there's more Kirby games coming in the future. There's certainly going to be
Oh
more
God.
Xenoblade coming in the. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's more Pikmin, and we know there's more Metroid coming, but I think that kind of added reassurance, and Nintendo sees that these sales are performing well and not just good enough to,
Hmm.
to point to it in their report here, is really great.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And my initial thought, when I'm looking at this list, specifically, I'll leave kind of Kirby out here, and not because I don't like Kirby, but just because I look at this list, I'm like, okay, what do Pikmin, Metroid, and Xenoblade Chronicles have in common on the Switch? It's that they get games released, because you have more sales when you release more games. Like Xenoblade Chronicles is about to have 4 games on the Nintendo Switch. Pikmin has had 3 games released on Switch, and Metroid will have 3 games by the time it's all said and done. So, like, I think that's also bodes well for just the fact of like getting new Metroid games, like, because obviously the more game, like, the better that you do sales wise, the more you're going to be invested into making new games, and the more new games that you have, the more you're going to sell, just by virtue of the fact that there's
There's more to
probably
buy.
people like us buying a couple new Metroid games. So that sticks out to me, because I mean, really, like, what was the last Nintendo console to have more than one Metroid game? Probably the Wii, which had other M and corruption. Um, it was a long time ago. Like, I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking 15 years ago. So that is, it's really great to see. And I like that they've kind of, I guess, like, showcase those series too, because those to me just seem like kind of, I shouldn't say up and coming series. Pikmin certainly isn't new. Xenoblade Chronicles isn't really new at this point either. But like, you've noticed that Nintendo's put more of a focus on them lately. I mean, it might even sound silly, but remember that collage that we saw for I don't even remember what, but like there was
What,
all
for
the
the Nintendo World Store or whatever it
yeah,
was, or the
yeah,
museum?
yeah, and
I
there
think it
was
was the
lots
Nintendo
of
Museum.
Metroid representation on it, which is really
Yeah.
great to see. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I
And
I like it.
I think it is funny though, because like when you think back to the games that, it's also the quality of games, like the games that
That's
were
true.
like there were no Metroid Wii U games, and the 3DS had Federation Force and Samus Returns. Not to say that Samus Returns was a bad game or anything, but it was, I would say, safe, and certainly wasn't like a needle mover really.
Oh, it
Um,
came out at the wrong time.
and it came out at the wrong time, sure. But it is funny to kind of point to that, because they're like, look, it barely sold anything. Well, like, no, duh, it barely sold anything. Look at the games you're putting out. You put out some good games and people buy them, Like it's a crazy theory. And speaking of
I
even
still hold
Xeno's,
firm that they should have actually ported Samus Returns to Switch, but that's
it's
neither
not,
here nor there.
I think you know what? I still think that it was better that they just went into development for new games. Even if it meant like Metroid Prime 4's development ended up getting canned, and like I, as much as Samus Returns was left to die and kind of shrivel up on the 3DS,
Hmm.
I don't think it would have been a needle mover on the Switch either. I think it's still it wasn't as fresh and reinvigorating as Dread was. It didn't look as good, certainly. And it's also a remake of a game that many in the series have already played. So
I think actually, like, the ideal time for Samus Returns would have been within the last 12 months, or like coming up actually. Kind of actually, like Xenoblade
mm,
Chronicles X is coming to the Switch finally, which is a great game.
yes,
But just
the one I want to actually play.
kind of one of those games that just holds you over until the Switch 2 is ready to launch. Like that's kind of what I think that the good spot for Samus Returns would have been. And that's probably not gonna, it's probably not gonna sell a bunch of copies in that spot either. But I don't know, just to at least have it. And maybe actually that's not a bad segue here, because we did get some updated sales figures for Nintendo Switch games, and some of these are just absolutely buck wild. So we'll get to Metroid in a second here, but my goodness, 63 million, 64, excuse me, million copies of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, 46 million copies of Animal Crossing. That is just unfathomable. The one that sticks out to me always is Breath of the Wild, like at 32 million copies. Just like, Zelda is a big series, but I never thought of it as being like big series. But like, holy moly, is that ever?
Well, this is the biggest it's ever been. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure I read in that thread that there are the 42% of all Zelda franchise sales all time have happened on the Switch. So Zelda was a game that like was big, but it was like more in like the cultural like zeitgeist, you know? It wasn't like a
Yeah.
Grand Theft Auto or a Mario. It was something that like was a respected franchise. It might not have sold as much, but it was always known as being like a top tier, and it's still obviously sold pretty well, but like a top tier game quality wise. But it's the Switch that really kind of, and the type of game that it is now, that really just propulsed like the whole thing into the stratosphere, really.
Just a crazy number. And we got our first sales numbers for Echoes of Wisdom too. Actually, you haven't played Echoes of Wisdom, right?
I haven't played Echoes of
You know
Wisdom.
what?
No.
It's a really charming throwback game that anybody looking for a classic Zelda experience should check it out. Echoes of Wisdom has been out for like a month and a bit, and it's already at 2.5 million copies. So I mean, that's pretty respectable. But I'll tell you what, it hasn't sold as many copies as Metroid Dread, which is
Metroid Dread in the 38th spot, which I think is a pretty respectable,
not
considering how
bad.
many Mario games are ahead of it and Pokemon games that are in the top 38 spots that like are obviously going to sell more. I mean, Dread is in a good spot. It hasn't. I think the only thing I would take away from it is that, you know, after the initial releases of both Dread and Metroid Prime Remastered, the games don't have a great tail. You know,
No,
like
they have no
people aren't.
legs.
There's no legs. Like people are. They buy the game at the release. Whoever's gonna buy it's gonna buy it, and then that's it. Like we're looking at this right now. Metroid Dread is at 3.070 million units sold, but the last time that was updated was Q4 2022, so 2 years ago, which means that there haven't been any significant sales in 2 years for the game.
Hmm.
Now, you know, that could also I think the biggest thing from that is that Metroid games classically don't they don't have the replayability that people look for these days, right? Like back in the day, like people the replayability from a Metroid game worked because like you got secret endings and you got, you know, you want to 100% the game, or Samus is going to go into a skimpy outfit or whatever, right? But, you know, nowadays replayability comes from customization and multiplayer and and social interactivity. I mean, if you look at the top 10 best-selling games here, Mario Kart 8, Animal Crossing, Smash Brothers, Pokemon, Super Mario Party, New Super Mario Brothers. Those are all multiplayer games, right?
Hmm.
They have replayability like built into the core of it. The replayability of Metroid, it's too maybe not dated is the right word, but maybe it is. I think just like the way Metroid goes about replayability is not like it doesn't work as well. It doesn't speak to the current climate of gamers today. And that's why I've been harping on Metroid Prime 4. I hope it has more customization. I hope it has multiplayer. I hope it has all this stuff that brings people continually back into the game, but also more importantly, keeps the game at the top of people's minds. I mean, look at Mario Kart. Mario Kart, number one, obviously, I mean, it's Mario Kart. Everyone knows what it is. They're gonna play it. It has multiplayer, but it also has new tracks coming out every few months or whatever it is, right? Has tons of characters, has all these different ways to go back and replay the game. That's why it's at the top. Animal Crossing had obviously the COVID boost and whatnot, but you have people going back to the islands and going to their friends' islands, all that. Pokemon, you're battling people online. Like that kind of replayability is what I think Metroid needs for it to start getting up higher in those sales, and I hope we do see that.
I think I agree. And there's a couple different ways you could do. I mean, like, to me, it seems. I feel like Nintendo should just really kind of lean into the whole speedrunning randomizer. Like, put it in there. Make it a part of your game. Have people stream it. Make it a part of the Nintendo World Classics that they do. Like, I don't know. You could do worse than It's funny actually. I've been playing a ton of Metroid Prime Hunters lately, and say what you will.
Crazy words I never thought I'd hear you say.
I know. And I've been playing it on a controller too, by the way. I went the long, arduous process of mapping it through Steam so that I could play it on controller. But I mean, say what you will about Metroid Prime Hunters, and I take my shots at it. But that game, I mean, it really went for it in terms of multiplayer. Like, there's a bunch of different modes that you could do. There's there's got to be pushing like 30 different arenas that you could go to. Like, I think you could do worse than something like that. And when I say like lean into the speed running, I'm thinking more for like 2D Metroid games. I think like, yeah, if you wanted to do that for Metroid Prime 4, like, yeah, I've been kind of on that fence of like, I don't want to take away any assets from making a great adventure or more Metroid games in order to accommodate multiplayer, and I'd still probably say that's true. But I mean, if you can do it without, without impacting the single
Without
player
compromising
experience,
it,
yeah, like,
it's been done before,
why
man.
not? Yeah, why not?
Many games have had great campaigns and multiplayers. I think about it as like, Zelda needed to change for it to be where it is today, right? Pokemon has changed, with like the Legends games, which, certainly the traditional games still sell very well as well, but like they've taken those like leaps, right? They've taken those risks. And I agree. I think like the speedrunning thing and leaning into that would be great too. But that also again kind of harkens back to me as like an older type of replayability that doesn't speak as much to the current ecosystem of gamers. I really want like more stuff in the game that's going to keep people constantly playing them. And even like Dread and Metro Prime Remastered, I don't sit down and play the game every day because it's mostly just a single player campaign. You beat it and you're good, and then you go back to it, in a few months or something like that. What Metroid needs, I think what it just desperately needs is that replayability, that customization to get people wanting to jump back into it every day and talk about it online and share different things about their experiences that might be different from someone else's and engage with people in different ways, bring back, multiplayer and all that kind of stuff. That's, I think, what really is going to make Metroid Prime 4 go, like in that example, from maybe like a 3 or 4 or 5 million unit selling game to a 6 or 7, 8, 9 or 10 million unit selling game, which I think is totally possible considering Kirby and the Forgotten Land sold 7.5 million copies. I think Metroid Prime 4 can do that.
I think it can do that, and I think it has to do that because I can't live with that number being ahead of Metroid Dread. Also
bad,
to your point, also staying stagnant is Metroid Prime Remastered, which is, let's see, the 61st best-selling Switch game at 1.36 million units. Hasn't been updated in about a year. Actually, almost 2 years, excuse me. So your point is well made about... and you know what? Like, I kind of do... I'm not sure, based on what we saw in Metroid Prime 4, if that's going to be the game. But I do think the way that you're going to be playing Metroid is going to change, specifically probably Metroid Prime.
I think it should, and I think it should. And I don't think that means that it's
should.
going to lose what makes it Metroid. I think maybe as fans we need to be like less scared about the possibilities of like losing what it is that's so dear to us. And I get that totally. It's like the same thing when people talk about like, oh, maybe there should be a new protagonist or something, like Samus should pass the torch over. And to me, I'm like, oh, there are so many more adventures that Samus can go on that we haven't gotten yet. And so I feel it's the same way with like holding on to the classic Metroid experience. Like, we haven't gotten enough classic Metroid because we just don't get enough games off, and there's so many more we can get. And I totally get that, but I think like an evolution of the series is what's gonna keep us getting more games. And I mean, trying new things is that in and of itself gets us more new games, right? So, I mean, it's still nothing to scoff at. I mean, it did Metroid Prime Remastered on its own did better than like the new Princess Peach game that dropped, right? Which, that's not bad. It did better than a new WarioWare game. It did better than a new well, I guess it's a remake remaster, Mario versus Donkey Kong, right? That's not exactly a crazy group to be comparing to, but I mean, you look at Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread did better than Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Let's go. Let's go. It did better. I mean, it's doing better. It probably won't in the end, but against the new Zelda game, Pikmin 3 Deluxe,
Yeah,
right?
I would suggest to you that by like
I think
Christmas
it's gonna pass
time,
it.
it's gonna
Yeah.
pass it. But
My favorite thing actually seeing this is that unrelated to Metroid though, but Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, the remake for that is almost at 2 million units sold. It's
that's
not
pretty
better
cool.
than,
Yeah,
which is pretty good. It's not better than how Origami King did, but as someone who would love more, again being
traditional.
hypocritical here, but
Yeah.
like more traditional Paper Mario in this sense, I'm like, it is funny how you look at other franchises and you're like, oh, I want this to go forward, but this game, I want this to go back, or I want it to stay this, it's
You know what the difference is,
want it to
though,
stay the
at least
same.
for me with Paper Mario, because I also really love the first two games, is that like they did evolve the gameplay in Super Paper Mario, and then they changed it again for Color Splash, and
And they
there's the
changed
one
it
in between I'm
again.
missing, and then they changed
Sticker
it again.
Star.
Yeah, and it's like
It
it's
never
it's
stays the same.
wait, it's I hate to even say it out loud, but I'm about to. Like it's almost like Kirby, where like each game is just like a different gimmick just slapped on it, and it's like, well, maybe we could bring it almost like what Metroid did, where it's like bring it back. Let's make a couple safer classic games, and then once we kind of get that feel back, that formula, that really hone down to what works, let's
Hmm.
evolve it, let's expand it. So, yeah, I actually, you know what sticks out to me like a sore thumb on this list, and I don't know why, but
Arms.
no, Arms I think is right
Because I
about
was
where it
very
should be.
surprised at how many units Arms sold, to be really honest with you. Like, really? Almost 3 million people bought Arms? I don't believe
I
that. I
mean,
don't believe that.
that
I've
was
never
an
seen a
early
single
Switch game,
person
right?
play that. Yeah, it wasn't early. It was a
I
very early
I
Switch
played the
game.
demo. I downloaded the demo and I was doing the Arms thing. No, what sticks out to me that I cannot believe that this game has sold like 4.5 million copies is that Clubhouse Games.
Oh, I'm
I
not surprised by that.
I guess I shouldn't be because it's the ultimate casual game to play, but I just like when it was announced, I remember just being like, who the heck's gonna buy this? And
I feel like that's
looking,
a game that
yeah,
like old people buy too, Like that's a game that
yeah.
literally anybody can play. It's like a stocking stuffer type game, and I'm sure it costs like nothing to make, you know. And I mean, it even looked like Ring Fit Adventure, super high up, but Nintendo
I will
Switch
say actually,
Sports.
Ring Fit Adventure is sick.
Nintendo Switch Sports sold 14.3 million units, and recently this past year sold another 1.2 million units. Like those kind of broader, like simple. I mean, these simple sports games, simple board game type stuff always really sells. And on a system like the Switch, where you can bring it around portably and put it in front of a group of people and or dock it onto a TV at a party, like that's super easy. You can't do that with Metroid Prime Remasters,
I mean, you're right.
I mean,
I
you
don't know
could, but
what.
you kind of bring the party down, I think, a little bit.
Well, depending on where you are in Metroid
Depends
Prime
on the party.
Remastered, yeah, it depends on the
Yeah, that's
party.
true. That's true.
Yeah, I don't know. It just yeah, it was probably just me being dumb, but I was like, oh man, this looks so weird. And 4.5 million units later, obviously, I'm eating my words there. But I still do hope that maybe one day we can see either Samus Returns or that fabled Metroid Prime 2 remastered added to this list of Nintendo Switch games. Hopefully, maybe before the Switch has run its course. But yeah, it's pretty exciting. Like all in all, like we're definitely gearing up for the Switch 2, which means we're gearing up for Metroid Prime 4. I feel pretty good saying that I think the next time we see the Switch 2, like the big reveal, I think chances are pretty good we're going to see Metroid Prime 4 either at that event or not far behind it as well. So I don't think we're going to be waiting long to maybe see what that evolution is going to be. Because I think it's going to be something. I don't know what. Maybe it's like they're moving more open world, or I don't know, but I think it's going to be something. And yeah, I mean that's probably we're probably not too terribly far away from it.
I'm almost feeling that Metroid Prime 4 gets released late enough in the Switch's lifespan that it's almost essentially a Switch 2 launch title. It's kind of how I'm looking at it. Like they can almost like it releases like I wouldn't even be surprised if it released like the week of the Switch 2, and then they almost kind of like position it as like a Switch 2 launch title in a way. I could kind of see that. I almost I mean, I could also definitely see them just releasing it like 2 or 3 months ahead of it and then just moving on. But to me, like it's a game that could still kind of show off the capabilities of the Switch 2, particularly the backwards compatibility. It could be kind of that game that is like the lead in for this system is backwards compatible. Look at this awesome Switch game that just released, looks beautiful, and now you can play it on Switch 2. I wouldn't even be surprised if they market it as a Switch 2 title and be like, it's also on the Nintendo Switch. So if you have that, you can play it on that because it just looks so good.
I think that's exactly what they're gonna do. Like, we talked about it forever, but I mean, like, I think it would be such a miss if this wasn't a cross-gen title, and I mean, yes, like being able to play Switch games on the Switch 2 helps. So at the end of the day, like, what's the real difference? But I do think that there is a difference between like being a Switch 2 game and just being able to play a game on the Switch 2. I maybe it sounds like not a big deal, but I think it is kind of
I mean, I see the difference that you're making. I think at this point, I'm pretty convinced that it's a Switch 1 title. They might market it as like a Switch 2 title in a way of like you can play it on the Switch 2, but I don't think it's gonna have like a Switch 1 release and a Switch 2 release. At least not
I
at the
think it will.
onset.
I think
I
it
don't.
will.
I feel like if anything, maybe we get a Metroid Prime 4 DX or not HD, but like Ultimate Edition, a couple years into the Switch 2's lifespan ahead of like the next Metroid game or something. But at this point, I mean, I just feel like what would be the point of having a Switch 2 and a Switch 1 release? Like Metroid Prime 4 looks great. Like what do they really need to enhance? Like again, I guess maybe it comes down to the gimmick that we don't know about of the Switch 2 that could work into Metroid Prime 4, you know?
Hmm.
But to me, I really see it as it's a Switch 1 title. They're gonna position it as playable on Switch 2, and it'll be good enough to play on Switch 2 as if it is a Switch 2 title. But I definitely don't think I almost feel very confident at this point that where it's not gonna be separate releases. There's not going to be a Switch 1 version and a Switch 2 version. Again, unless they did like an ultimate version or a DX or whatever a couple years down the line. I'm almost going to put my foot down on that and and stake my claim on that take.
I mean, I could definitely see it for sure. I just I don't think it's the right move, but we'll see, I guess. And I don't think we'll have to wait long to see because obviously March is the deadline, but I think it's going to be coming earlier. I think we're going to get that reveal in January or maybe February at the latest. But it's certainly getting closer and closer and closer to that point.
I
So
I
we'll
got to
see.
ask you, man, what do you think the Switch 2 hook is? Like what do you think the gimmick is? Like the real gimmick for this console?
I've been thinking about that for the last little bit, and I keep on using the kind of like the NES to SNES and DS to 3DS is kind of my templates. I really think I really think maybe there's not like a quote unquote gimmick. Like I really wonder if it's just like upgraded processing, upgraded specs, upgraded like the battery's better, the Joy-Cons were like everything that people want for the Switch, and then maybe it's got better online infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. But like in terms of like I don't think there's gonna be like a little toggle that you can switch to make Link and Zelda look 3D when they're not, or the morph ball to like pop out at you like VR or something. I don't know. Like
Please no, I'm over that.
I
I didn't
kind
like
of
it back
think
then. I didn't like it
like
now.
so everything we've seen so far, NSO is transferring over. It's backwards compatible. The good kind of safe moves here. I wonder if they just don't continue that, and like the good safe move here is just to make a better Switch. I could see that.
I don't know.
Um,
It's not Nintendo's, and you've said
it's
this. I mean,
not. No.
how many times have we talked about like I was on the side of like just make a Switch Pro, just make a stronger Switch, and you're like they're not going to do that. When does Nintendo ever just release a better version of a console? Like they've literally I don't think they've ever released, at least in the recent memory, of a new platform that didn't have a solid gimmick that stood out from the previous one. Like even the GameCube's
Yeah.
gimmick was like it had a lunchbox handle. It had something, right? Like the Wii had motion controls, the Wii U had the gamepad, the 3DS had the 3D graphics or whatever, the Switch obviously portability. I think it's going to have something. My mind right now is going to two things. It's going to number one, it has two screens. is my
Maybe.
somehow it has two screens. Like you can maybe like open it like okay, crazy idea. When it's closed, like let's say you could open the Switch, right? Like almost like a DS. But imagine when the DS is closed, it had a screen on the outside on the top, so you could play it with one screen. But when you opened it, there were two, so it has three screens almost. That the more I say it, probably sounds dumb, but like it either has two screens or there's going to be a way for you to connect multiple Switch 2s together portably and combine their screens somehow. Because that I don't I'm just trying to think of like how else they could really maybe they add more
Here's what they could maybe
Joy-Cons or something.
maybe you could try. I don't even know if this is possible because I'm no tech guy here, but like, is there a way that they could get the Switch to like be able to, instead of docking it to get it on TV, just connect with the TV somehow, like a smart TV, and
Just like slide it up or something.
well, like yeah, like pretty much like you're just like, it's like when you connect to Bluetooth or something like that. Like instead of connecting to Bluetooth, be like, I'm gonna connect to that TV behind you, Dak, and play my Switch. Maybe that, I don't know. Maybe that could be it, and eliminates the need
For a dock.
for a dock if you're
I
really out portable. But like, kind of, what's the point of that though? Because you're out portable, so like, I don't know.
I mean, on one hand, it's like, yeah, I don't know. It would. I could see the commercial though of like people going around and like, oh, they see a TV
Yeah,
screen
like,
and they can throw it on there or whatever. Like I can see the commercial in my head. I can feel that. But then like, what do you do with the Switch? Like, do you put it down on the floor? Like, do you still hold it in your hand? Does it work like? Do they go back to the gamepad and they make it so that way you can play stuff on the screen and then have stuff on your Twitch or on your Switch screen and look at it that way? Do they go back to that? I mean, I could see that happening because like
maybe.
in a way the Switch was or the Wii U is kind of like the prototype almost for the Switch, like the gamepad, but maybe they go back to that gimmick now that it can be maybe implemented better and be like, okay, you can play the Switch both on the TV and on the portable version and have both like the docked and the portable settings be playable at the same time. I could see that being maybe the gimmick.
You know what? I actually, I don't even think your idea of like the two screens is impossible either. I could see the Switch 2 maybe having like one of those
Foldable
screens.
flip phones.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
something like that,
Oh,
and then that would let them play DS
okay.
games or 3DS games
Well,
on NSO.
that's the thing is like I'm thinking like how do they get DS games onto the NSO without having two screens? And I'm like, you really can't. You have to have two screens. So the Switch 2 might have two screens.
It
Switch two
might.
screens, the Switch 2S or whatever it's, like I don't know.
It might, because I mean, like, there are DS games on the Switch right now, but they all kind of have like the Skyward Sword thing where you basically press a button and then that acts as your like stylus on the screen. Like I just played Castlevania
Yeah.
Collection, which actually I think is going to factor in how Metroid Prime or Metroid 6 should play, but we'll talk about that at another time. But like I don't think you could do that if you wanted to do NSO. Like you'd have to do that for every single ROM, and they don't typically touch the ROM. So like, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know. Like it'd be kind of cool. Like if your portable Switch, you just pulled it out and like you're playing this big monster kind of big screen in front of you, and I don't know, maybe to save battery you go down to one screen or something like that. I don't know, but there's a couple options I think up in the air. Like I know I said it and I still believe it. It seems like Nintendo's made a series of just kind of like more logical, safer moves in the Switch era, particularly since Furukawa took over. It seems like he's kind of just like, let's just do basic stuff which works. So that being said, especially if it's called like the Super Switch, I could just see it being a more powerful Switch. I don't think I think that's probably just as likely as the other things we talk about, where maybe a couple years ago I would not have said with confidence, yeah, they're just going to release a more powerful Switch. That seems, I was almost going to say like below Nintendo, but you know what I mean? Like it seems like something they wouldn't do, but now, yeah, I can see that.
I mean, I still go back to Nintendo. Like, even Nintendo won't even go back to an IP they have unless they have like an idea for it. Like they won't like they're not just gonna make like a new, fresher looking F-Zero, right? They're convinced that they need to have some kind of gimmick, some kind of idea to push it. And
Hmm.
I feel like they still have that same feeling for the consoles as well, and they will continue to have that because otherwise, why would you buy a Switch 2 if you don't care about better performance and all that. And I think they know that they need to continue to cater to the large audience that they've gotten for the Switch and not hunker down on the more hardcore gamers that might also have one.
I mean, that's a great point. I don't know. Like, two screens, I think could be likely. I Now that I say it, like I don't know what the ultimate goal of just being able to connect to any TV would be, because like,
It makes for a great commercial though, man. It
I mean,
makes
it
for
makes
a
for a
cool
good
ad.
commercial, but like, what
I
do you
can
actually
see
do
it.
with it? You know, like
You hijack like the screens in time. Oh my God. Okay. The end of the commercial ends with someone having the Switch 2 in Times Square, and they throw the screen onto one of the big billboard digital ads in Times Square, and everyone can see and play together. Tell me that doesn't happen in a Nintendo commercial, man.
that
That would happen.
that would be pretty tight actually. If that if
Okay, that's what
the
it's about. It's about hijacking nearby TV screens with your Switch 2. I think that's the gimmick.
they'd got to have like Wario or something, like WarioWare trailer, and all of a sudden that big hot dog in Times Square is shooting off. That would be just the absolute best.
Just have
Um,
Xenoblade characters just show up in Times Square.
hey, yeah, that's
Crazy. Some people would enjoy
it's a
that.
growing franchise. One of
Yeah.
Nintendo's proudest franchises of this last console generation, including Metroid. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. And we won't have to wait long. So, I don't. And that's kind of the thing about Nintendo is like, you don't really ever know, which is kind of like exciting, kind of frustrating sometimes, but kind of exciting too. So hopefully, I mean, hopefully it's more Switch than it is Wii U. That's all I can say, and I feel pretty confident saying it.
I think
It's gonna
I think
be, I
they've
think,
learned from their
safer.
mistakes.
I think they have to.
I
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I want to mention the same image that I was pulling or talking about the many series titles are showing growth on Nintendo Switch. On the other side of that, they talk about strengthening development resources, and they list like their in-house, or second party now, like development studio. So obviously, like NTD, like
Mm-hmm.
NST, Mario Club, and all that. And then they mentioned like they just recently acquired Next Level Games, and they have like Nintendo Pictures and whatever. Retro Studios is listed right there as a part of their strengthening development resources. It is put underneath Monolith Soft, but I get that. But like, I love that Retro Studios, and they have been a
Oh
good partner
yeah.
for Nintendo for a while. I mean, they helped develop Mario Kart 7. Obviously, they did the DK, games that came out. So they've been it's just great to see them like continuing to acknowledge Retro as well as like one of their core critical partners
Mm-hmm.
delivering excellent Nintendo titles or supporting development of those titles, much like Monolith Soft does for a variety of different titles and all that. So, or next level games. So like that's I don't know, that's also cool to see, like as a obvious huge Retro Studios fan, to see
Mm-hmm.
like Nintendo considering it such an important part of the family is also great.
I've got kind of a weird sidebar here, but sometimes when I see retro, like the logo for the studios, I can't help but think of the game studio, which is no longer around anymore, called Silicon Knights, which,
Hmm.
if you remember, made like Eternal Darkness for the
Hmm.
GameCube. They made the Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes game. They made a game called Two Human later.
I was gonna say Two Human is the game I know from Silicon Knights. Yeah.
Yeah, like I always, like, I remember back in like 2001 or whatever, like hearing about these new upcoming studios, Retro and Silicon Knights, and I was excited for both of their games. And I always thought it was a bit sad that it just didn't work out with Silicon Knights, cuz like the games that they did make for the GameCube were awesome.
Hmm.
I never played Two Human. I heard mixed things about that, and ultimately it got like just, destroyed off the face of the earth, but from a lawsuit. But I don't know. I always thought it was like a little bit sad to see Retro just kind of like still making these great amazing games, with the other studio just, not around anymore. I don't know if anyone else ever remembers Silicon Knights but me. But I also thought that they had a really sick logo whenever you fired up their games. It was like a little like green cube with a sword through it. I thought it looked cool.
Hmm. 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 Yeah, I for me, I love seeing the Next Level Studios logo on there. They might not be the next level of old, but for someone who grew up on the sports titles and the GameCube, like to still see them kicking around and
Mm-hmm.
doing stuff, I'm like, so they've survived. They've survived. I think it's interesting they throw in Nintendo Pictures in there. There's also Nintendo Systems. I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is? Nintendo Systems.
I
Is
don't
that
know.
like for their mobile stuff maybe? But I'm into you know, that's something we haven't heard about in a little while. What's going on with Nintendo Pictures, right? I'm sure they're working on another Super Mario Brothers game, and I want to say they
Well,
probably
they
have
said
a.
it's going to be out by 2026.
Sorry, I said game. I meant movie.
Yeah, I know
Oh,
what you
they.
meant. Yeah, the movie is going to be out in
Well, I hope they're
2026.
making another Super Mario Brothers game. That would be great. But um, hopefully they
Come
continue
on,
making
Nintendo,
those.
make another Mario game, damn
I
it.
hope they make another Mario game. Oh, did they say it's gonna come out in 2026?
They confirmed it. Yeah, I want to say it's
Okay.
coming out like April 2026. Haven't heard anything about the Zelda movie.
But that's not an animated movie,
It's
though.
not. It's not. So I mean, they got to be. I'm pretty sure. Like, I mean, I'm pretty
That's
sure
gonna
we're
be
gonna be
so
getting a
bad.
Donkey Kong movie. We're gonna be getting a Luigi's Mansion movie.
That's what I want to see. I want to see a Luigi's Mansion movie and a DK movie. They need to. I love the Donkey Kong show, the Donkey Kong Country show back in the day, which and a year of the generation
Would
that
it
would have watched
surprise you
that.
to learn that I have actually recorded
Um,
about a dozen podcasts, episode by episode, on that show for virtual theater?
that I need to go listen to
It's
because I remember
it's a great
renting.
show.
I remember. I mean, I watched. I don't think I watched because it was like a Canadian show,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
it was. Yeah,
So it wasn't like on American TV from what I remember. Or if it was, I didn't watch it. I watched it by renting the tapes from Blockbuster is what how I did it. And so I watched it out of order, whatever tapes they had. Yeah, that's what I want to see more of actually is what Nintendo Pictures is working on. Maybe they're working on a Metroid movie, most likely not, but maybe one day.
I feel pretty safe now saying of like if they're giving us a live action Zelda movie, I think they're gonna give us a live action Metroid movie too. That just makes so much sense to me rather than animated.
You,
I don't know people hate that, but I really think it does. It adds to that like big feel for me of a movie.
It does, but there have been some really good animated movies that have come out this
Yeah,
year, specifically The Wild Robot and Transformers 1, where I look at those and I'm like, they could make a Metroid movie that looks like this, that plays like this, and I would be
100%.
totally cool with that. So as much as I would love, see the thing to me at least is that I think they can screw up a live action Metroid a lot easier than they can screw up an animated Metroid movie.
I
Same with the
think
Zelda.
I think you're
The
right.
Zelda movie. So I
It's the
kind of would like to see it
hardest.
animated.
It's the hardest path to success making a live action movie. However, if you could do it, I think that the rewards are greater than making a really great animated movie. And maybe people will disagree with that, but I think so. Like,
On the other hand, you could argue that there already are live action Metroid movies and they're called Alien and Aliens. And
very
you don't
true.
necessarily need a live action Metroid game. It might be more fun to see a 2D or 3D animated Metroid movie. But I mean, you could
I
also
don't
kind
know
of,
though. I think you
I
watch
don't know.
Alien Romulus, you're just like, that looks awesome. I'd love to see instead of a facehugger a Metroid.
I Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. I mean, I would love to see a live action Metroid for sure. But yeah, like I said, it's cool to see the family of Nintendo's development studios, and I'm curious to see what they're cooking up. And now with all these news and backwards compatibility dropping, and we have the Switch 2 coming up, and it's like, all right, like now I'm getting back into the flow of okay, I'm excited
Yeah.
for what's coming up here.
The stew is coming together here for the next generation of Nintendo finally because I mean it really has seemed like since about February of 2024 maybe even earlier to like the Switch is just kind of waiting for the Switch 2 like that's what it's felt like to me like we're all just waiting for the Switch 2 pretty much after Tears of the Kingdom came out actually and
Which
there's
I
been
didn't get.
I mean, there's been some great games. Don't get me wrong. Like I thought, yeah, because Wisdom, great game, but it feels like we're waiting for the Switch 2, and that wait's almost over, which is great. So
It's wild. I mean, think of where you were when the Switch released in
yeah,
2016. I was living in a different state. I was just out of college. I was working three jobs ago. Like it's kind of wild how long Nintendo has really gotten the squeeze, the juice, juice in this lemon here, getting the squeeze out of it, right? Like they've really done really well maintaining the Switch over a long period of time.
they have, and good on them because I mean,
Yeah,
it's obviously been an incredible success for them, but it is time for what's next. So,
it's time.
let's just so let's let everybody know that starting next week, we have an anniversary coming up. It is, in fact, the 20th anniversary of Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. And we're going to have a bunch of shows dedicated to Echoes here, including a definitive ranking that actually you and I are not going to be a part of, because we already did a definitive ranking way back when. So Doom, we let Doom run that. He's going to get a bunch of his friends. They're going to talk about Metroid Prime 2 Echoes and redo the definitive rankings. That's going to be fun. We're going to be ranking the bosses. We're just going to have a general retrospective. That's actually coming up next week, so that'll be a lot of fun. And if you're really dying for Metroid Prime 2 content now, our pal Kiwi Talks actually just put out an interview with Kaden Pearson, who was a designer on Metroid Prime 2, which we'll try to give a listen to so that we can talk about it a little bit next week as well. So that should hold you over. But we got a lot of Echoes content coming up. It pretty much actually going to take us almost to the end of the year, and then we'll talk about, of course, what we want for Metroid coming into the new year, and how that directly ties to Metroid Prime 4 and the Switch 2, whatever that happens to be. So lots of cool stuff coming up. But yeah, starting next week, it's all about Echoes, and I'm glad, because I feel like we haven't talked about Echoes very much on this podcast, and 20 years is a pretty wicked milestone. So excited to get that going.
Yeah, man, I was literally 11 years old when that game came out. It's still remember my begging my mom for it for Christmas.
I was how old?
Don't age yourself too hard.
Oh, I'm gonna age myself. I was in high school. I was sick. I just turned 17 when that game came out, and I have literally
wow.
doubled that age total right now. So I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. But yeah, Metroid Prime Echoes. So tune in. We got a lot of content coming in over the next couple weeks. So if you haven't played in a long time, go give it a whirl. Get yourself familiarized, and we'll have a lot of content for you about that game. Anything you want to? I don't know. Any final thoughts here, Dak, before we get out of here?
No, I think we all pretty much covered it. It was honestly kind of wild that we got some of that news dropping like as we were about to start recording. Obviously, it's always good to see where Nintendo's at sales wise and what that means for the future. And yeah, I mean we're at this point we are 5 months or less away from the official Switch 2 reveal, which is super exciting, and maybe likely from Metroid Prime 4 dropping. So all exciting stuff. It's great to see when I look at official Nintendo documentation that they're referencing Metroid in a positive light. Obviously, the backwards compatibility is very exciting. And yeah, I mean, Metroid Prime 2, a GOAT game. I mean, we talked about it before the show. I really got to jump back in and replay that. I just wish there was an easier way to do that. I think I'll have to, I wish there was an easier way to play some of these older games. I think I might have to boot up Dolphin again to break that out. I think it's probably what that's going to end up happening here. But yeah, all good stuff. And I'm excited for the month of Echoes, which is we're 10 days away from the anniversary, the official one. It was November 15th, so we're literally right around the corner from it. So yeah, that's all I've got.
Dang. November 15th. I'm going to see a concert that day, actually. So it's going to be a good day. Who am I seeing? I'm seeing a Canadian rap duo called Swollen Members. That is the name of the band. And you know what? They're so sick, actually. They're another one that their first single came out in 1997. So I'll throw you some songs of theirs to check out. But I'm excited.
Definitely send me some Swollen Members, bro.
Okay. That being said, we are, in fact, getting out of here. So thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us as we kind of breezed through topic by topic and had a nice little chat here today about the state of Nintendo and the state of Metroid. So, like I said, we're going to get out of here. Make sure to check us out over on OmegaMetroid.com. We actually have a couple secret projects in the works that should be done by the end of the year. So make sure that you're locked in there. We got a bunch of stuff coming for you. And also check us out wherever you get your podcasts. Go like, subscribe, recommend, rate, review, all that kind of good stuff. There is one podcast on this earth that is doing a weekly Metroid show, and you are listening to it. So if you know someone that loves Metroid, tell them about the Omega Metroid podcast and where they can get their weekly Metroid fix. Give us a follow wherever you're over on social at Omega Metroid Pod, at Spiteri316, at DaxCity_. Give our pal Doominal Crossing a follow as well, at Doominal Cross. And that, my friends, is going to do it for us. So, until next week, we're going to talk a little Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. Until then, take care.